In another video, we introduced the concept of macro, micro, macro, that fundamental process of how we rehearse, big, small, big. And we framed it in two ways. One is the idea of when you go from macro to micro, we're zooming in. We might start here and then zoom into 3 times magnified, and then maybe 5 times magnified to more micro, and then we come back out again to the big picture, back to the macro. We also talked about it in terms of fractal geometry. In fractal geometry, if we look at something from the big picture, it looks the same as we do when we look at it zoomed in. The relationships between the geometry and the way it looks is the same no matter what magnification we see it at. And we can think of the macro, micro, macro process of rehearsing the same way. That from this macro to this micro and back out is the same as this macro to this micro to this macro. It applies no matter where we start our macro. The process is the same. Some specifics of this. Well, if we do more, even a little bit more than just running the piece from start to finish, we can get some micro out of there. So if we run it, give some comments about a section or a global idea, and then run it again, we're doing a little bit of micro. It's just a little bit, and I would not recommend that being your bread and butter way of rehearsing, because it never gets into the details. It's always surface kind of conducting and rehearsing, and we don't really have the opportunity in that method as the mechanic would to pop the hood and see really what's going on, and perhaps to find some details that we can't hear or don't know how to diagnose if we're only listening to that macro picture. So, a few ways to get into that micro level. The first is breaking things down. This is something we're going to do all the time. So a very basic way to break things down is into melody and accompaniment. So we might run a piece or run a section. We can use that as synonyms for now. Run a section and then break it down into its melody, work on that, into its accompaniment, work on that, put them back together again, and then come back to the macro level. We know much music is constructed that way, so it's going to be appropriate. We might break that down to 3 levels. Perhaps we run a section or the piece, and then we try the melody, then we try the bass line, and then we try the rhythmic accompaniment. Then we put the bass line and the rhythmic accompaniment together, and then we put all 3 layers together as we pull back out to the macro. These are techniques we're going to use a lot. Another technique is the layering technique, where we build something up. So this is especially true if something isn't constructed as predictably or as traditionally as melody and accompaniment. So we might rehearse layer 1. It might be a rhythmic layer, dee-da, da, dee-da, dee-da, whatever. We work on that, and then we add layer 2. Perhaps we work on layer 2 separately. Da-da, do-dee-da-dum, da-dum, da-dum. Good. We work on that. Now let's try layer 1 and 2 together. Good. Now let's try layer 3. Dum, dum, dee-dum, dum, dum, dee-dum. Okay, we work on that. Let's try layers 1, 2, and 3 together. Lots of variations on this. You can imagine that perhaps we just try 1 and 3. Or maybe we know layer 3 is fine, so we don't have to rehearse it separately. We do 1 and 2 separately, combine them, and then add 3. But we're building up as we go. So let's try this at another level. We might start with the run-through and then just isolate a specific element of that. Let's say we're just going to do the melody, so we go into the melody, and then the melody now becomes our macro. So now we're going to work on the melody. Well, what can we work on? We might be able to break it down by instrumental color. So let's just try the violins on the melody. And let's build. Now we're building. Let's build with the trombones who have the melody. Good. Let's combine those. Good. Now double basses who have the melody. Let's try everybody together. And then we have our complete melody. We've layered, but we've started at this as our macro, just the melody, and then we've layered that together back out to the melody. We might do the same thing with the accompaniment. Okay, here's the accompaniment. Let's break it down by instrumental color or instrument group. and build it back together again. And our macro is here. Our macro is what before was our micro. Our accompaniment was our micro. Now our accompaniment is our macro, and we break it down from there and put it back together again. We might break things down just by instrument family. Perhaps we say just sopranos or just women. Let's try that. Just men. Okay, now let's combine that together. And of course, we work on them separately as we go, and then we assess and put it back together. And so, okay, just strings. All right, look at that, this, that. Let's woodwinds, brass, percussion. Okay, now let's put it together. We might isolate a specific issue that we want to focus on. So perhaps we go back to our melody issue and we want to work on phrasing. So then the melody is the macro, and we zoom in to the micro level of phrasing, and we work on where we're going to crescendo to and where we release, and then where the next phrase goes to. And then we put that in the context of the entire melody and the accompaniment, and we come back out again. We might break something down in terms of harmony. So we're at a much smaller level now. We might break down a chord. All right, let's try this chord. Let's just try the root of the chord, just the fifth of the chord, just the third of the chord, and then we build it back together and then come back out again. Well, we might do that with a rhythm. Perhaps there's a difficult rhythm. It might be in layers. Let's say it's just a single rhythm and we want to break it down. Let's try this, the first measure. Let's get that tight. Do, da, 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 da. Good. Second measure. Dee, dum, da, da, dum. Good. Let's climb them together. Do dum da 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 dum dim dum dum dum, and we build it as we go. So we said rhythm, folks. Measure 25. Let's go micro. Get that first measure. Let's get that second measure. Let's put it together. Now we have that rhythm. So we've had our macro, micro, macro. There is an infinite number of ways to break things down, and it really all comes down to being willing to get your hands dirty and pop the hood and break things down and then layer them or piece them back together again until you're back out to the macro.